Most are afraid of unknown depths, skirting shores thinking world flat. I'm with the island girls in celebration of new religion. Nobody led me or said this way. I sailed alone on makeshift raft with wind as companion. Fate for deliverance, confidence enough to assess new disposition. Seekers of lost paradise may seem fools to those who never sought the other worlds. Welcome to Momentary Zen with Zen Garcia. Visit www.fallenangels.tv. You're listening to Revolution Radio.
Pick it up next week. Once angel, swift, strong, we were witness to the grand unfolding, the establishment of heaven and earth as foundation for greater mystery. In you dwells the memory, the knowledge of Christ singing creation into manifest being. And though much has eluded many a prophet and king when it comes to the enigma of kingdom, all have equal merit to every obscure knowing. We are called to more than the expectation of world. And though it's been little season since we've entertained the sunshine of higher spaces, no remedy can replace the intrigue of such insight, nor diminish the memory of such love burned to mine. As humanity, we are inheritors of the most amazing opportunities, apportioned life, choice, freedom, granted miracle inclusion among the created existence. And no matter their attempts in hiding truth, those whom yield fully to calling are privy to beholden the Most High's secrets, and designated a keeper of the mysteries of heaven. Welcome, friends. I'm your host, Zen Garcia. This is Momentary Zen. And today I'm going to be covering, following up on some information from last week's show. It seems that some of the listeners are not clear on some of the aspects that Chris and I covered. Christopher Tyerman from the Chronicle Project. When we were discussing and talking about the Sabbaths and their alignment with the different festivals and feast days and the different holy days as far as those that are ordained in the Old Testament for the Hebrew people, the chosen people Israel. And even though we follow the Gregorian calendar now and most of the world adheres to it as far as it being a solar calendar and the way that all the weeks are run together and the breakdown of the different months, like February having 28 days and some months having 31 days and others with 30 days. Hello, Doc and Tracy and Cher and the Greek and Olive and Briar and Nighthawk and Hammerhead, Zipster, Sky, all those that are in the chat room. Welcome and thank you for joining me this evening, Leo Knight, Link, and the many others that are also in the chat room that I do not see in the immediate scroll. I'm going to cover two things today. I'm going to just clarify some of that as far as how to determine the Sabbath and how to understand the calendar that was given to us by the Most High prior to the Gregorian calendar and what we're using now. And and then afterwards, I'm going to go into some of the aspects of the fallen angels, as far as the rebel angels, and then a second incursion which happened with the Watchers, and how those two incursions align with the prior times and with some of the things that we've come to know as far as the mythology, the oral traditions of many indigenous peoples worldwide that cover um, and understand, have a memory of things that happened going way back even to that time. And Hesiod spoke about this in his work, Works and Days, when he talked about the Golden Age and then the Silver Age and the iron and the brass, and how these different epochs of time, how they define when the so-called gods or the ancient aliens or the Anunnaki or the Nephilim, whatever it is that you want to call it, how that prehistory, those things occurred prior to the last 6,000 years of modern humanity, and what the gospel lays out as the period from Adam to, humanity, who we are even now. Okay, well, and so just to bring some clarity to the Sabbath, help people understand it, the lunar months as they are laid out by God's calendar, and also God's calendar begins on the vernal equinox, which is the day that designates the beginning of spring. And the progression of the four seasons is spring, summer, fall, winter, which makes sense according to what we see as far as the creation and how things unfold. And, the Gregorian calendar begins with the new year begins in January 1st. And this is after, and the reason that they start it with January 1st is because of the winter solstice, and because the um, those that had established the Gregorian and as well as the Julian calendars, they were sun worshippers, worshippers of the sun god. And much like the Masons, because the Masons worship Lucifer as the sun god. And so the winter solstice represents the day when the sun reverses course. It's the longest night of the year, shortest day of the year, and it's on or near about December 21st that the sun reverses course in the sky, and moving from the Tropic of Capricorn begins to move back towards the equator and the Tropic of Cancer. And so, that's why that's why the Luciferians and the sun worshippers established December 25th as Christmas, and have basically duped the Christian world into celebrating the birth of Christ on that particular day. All of that, the winter solstice and the changing of the day, the new year to January 1st, has to do with sun worship, with the marriage of Christianity with paganism, which is what happened with the acceptance of the Julian calendar, and also with Constantine, and how um, how Christianity became paganized, and um, pagan religions, were also Christianized. And so from that time onward, we have followed a calendar which is based upon the movements of the sun and the 12 months as laid out by um, those particular calendars. And as far as the days of the week as well as the days of the month, they are also based upon the names of the pagan gods, the pantheon of gods and goddesses, as well as the names of the planets who were considered to be pagan gods as well. And even the days of the month find their basis in a similar manner, have their connections and links to these pagan deities. And so, anyways, going back to the calendar that was given to Adam when he was banished from paradise, he was given 4 books. One of them was the Book of Signs, and the Book of Signs the is the book that contained this particular calendar system that is based on the lunar months. And so the way that the months unfold is that you have one 30-day month and then you have a 29-day month, and they alternate back and forth for the 12 months of the year. Um, and the first day of the month is always designated new moon. And when I say new moon, I'm referring to not what science calls new moon, but what the Book of Enoch and as well as the Hebrew people, how they determined and designated the new moon. And that would basically be when the moon was 1/14 of a portion full. Because from the day of conjunction, when the moon is completely dark, or when it's called a dark moon, until the time that it is full, it goes through a progression of 15 days. And every quarter, it takes it takes the moon 7.3 days to go into the first quarter, and then full moon, and then third quarter, and back to conjunction. And so the Book of Enoch and the way that the Hebrew people determined new moon was by when the moon was that um, 1/14 portion full, or 1/7 the portion, as far as the first quarter. Um, and the way that science determines a new moon, it calls the when the moon is in conjunction, or when the moon is completely black and you cannot see it in the sky. That's when science determines or calls that particular the dark moon the new moon. And so all of the lunar months begin with the new moon, when you have that um, first crescent of the first quarter moon, the first day in the 7-day cycle of the first quarter moon. And then, 7 more days takes us to full moon, 7 more days to third quarter moon, and 7 more days back to conjunction. And every first day, the new moon day on God's calendar, is not counted as one of these 7 days of the uh, like, it's not designated Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, or Sunday. It just is the day of the new moon, the first day of the month on each of the lunar months. And then the next 6 days lead up to the second Sabbath, which is aligned with the first quarter moon. And also the way that God's calendar works is that every first, every 8th, every 15th, every 22nd, and every 29th, or um, all of those are Sabbaths. And the way that a synodic month works is that it averages 29 and a half days. And so that's why you have the alteration, alternatively, 1 month, 30 days, the next month, 29 days, the next month, 30 days, and so on and so forth for 12 months. And so every first, again, is um, is the new moon, the first of the month, and then on the 8th is the second Sabbath, the 15th, the third Sabbath, the 22nd, the fourth Sabbath, and then the 29th is the fifth and final Sabbath of the month. And every one of the months have 5 Sabbaths included within them. And so, and because the first day of the month, the new moon, is not designated as any of the days of the week, the way that we keep track of time with the Gregorian calendar in running all 7 days back to back to back, as far as the weeks, as far as Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and then the next day is Monday, and so on and so forth. All of the days, all the weeks, all the months of the year run congruently back to back. They're all in a long line. And so the Gregorian calendar never takes into account the day of the new moon. And so because of that, um, the new moon can fall on any day of the week. Like last Wednesday was the Sabbath. And so every day this month, the Sabbath will fall on the Wednesday. And so it changes like that. And so I hope that makes sense to you and that you can understand it better, because all of the feast days, the festivals, and the jubilees all also correspond to the day of the Sabbath and the fourth commandment to honor the Sabbath. And the a lot of the Christian world does not believe, or do not believe, that we are held to account currently, because they believe that we're under a new covenant and that we only have to follow the dictates of the New Testament. And so um, most people do not follow the Hebrew feast days or festivals, nor do they honor the new moon or the Sabbath in the way as I just laid it out for you. And they don't determine it in that way. Most mainstream Christians go to church on either Sunday or Sunday, and they're gathering and going together to church on those days is their way of honoring the Sabbath. And so, and another thing, as far as, the Christian holidays that we currently worship and follow, days like, Valentine's Day, Easter, Christmas, um, Halloween, all these different days, which are now Christian holidays, these are all paganized, um, ritual days from some honoring some pagan deity or some feast or festival, which, again, was honoring some pagan deity. And so all of those holidays are, again, not the original Hebrew feast days and festivals that were mandated, ordained by the Most High God for Christians and the Hebrew people to follow. And so, um, just to give you an idea of how so many people now are unwittingly involved in idolatry because they don't understand how to determine when the Sabbath is, nor that we are still under the ordinance to, to honor the festivals and feast days as laid out in the Old Testament. And so, hopefully that brings you clarity on what Chris and I were talking about last week. If you have not heard that show, you can go to my YouTube channel under Endeavor Freedom, and it would be one of the last shows that I've uploaded. All right, let me post this into the chat room real quick. All right. And so, one of the reasons why I wanted to get into, which I'll be going into this topic with the rest of this show, talking about the fall of the rebel angels, also the incursion of the Watchers, and how these two events align with the prior times. And when I say prior times, I'm speaking about pre-Adamic history and those things which occurred previous to the last 6,000 years, or what is the modern era of, modern humanity, and the creation of Adam, that he was the first of the modern humans, placed here. Banished from paradise, he found himself placed here upon the earth. And so the reason I'm want to cover some of this information is to help people to understand how we have also been deceived into, and a lot of the world has been deceived into worshiping the rebel angels or even the Watchers as the ancient aliens, as the gods of most of the pagan cultures and religions worldwide. You're welcome, Zipster and Olive, and those of you that found found that information beneficial as far as helping you to understand the Sabbath. And now, the reason I'm saying this, and this was the whole reason why I wrote my sixth book, Sons of God, Who We Are and Why We're Here, as well as my seventh book, Skyfall, was to help people to understand why it is that it says in Revelation 12 that that old serpent, that ancient dragon known as the devil and Satan, how it is that he deceiveth the whole world. Because this all goes back to what it talks about in Ezekiel chapter 28 and Isaiah chapter 14, when Lucifer, as a fallen cherub, how he had been in paradise prior to his fall, and how he wanted to be as the Most High, and how he boasted that he would elevate his throne, his his seat above the throne of God, and that he would steal the worship of the Most High, that he would displace the worship of the Father and the Son, so that he could parade himself as the new morning star. Because that's another thing that people don't realize, is that Even though Lucifer is known as the morning star, Yeshua or Jesus Christ, he is the original morning star, as it mentions in, I believe it's Revelation 19 or 20 or 21, one of those chapters. It talks about how he is from the lineage of David, but that he is the bright and morning star. And so Lucifer, wanting to be as the Most High, he has stolen not only that title, but also has diverted humanity's focus and worship of the original morning star to himself. And so we'll talk about more of that when we come back from the first break. And hopefully, in my discussing and pointing out the two incursions which occurred, um, in our ancient past, how these two incursions led to the establishment of the pagan religions worldwide, and how so many peoples have been led unknowingly and unwittingly, even to up until this day, with the continued worship of Lucifer and the rebel angels, um, without knowing any different or better. Just because they grew up in a certain culture or a certain part of the world, um, they've been led astray without realizing it. And so, and again, as far as my own background and my own history, I was involved in study of New Age mysticism, um, for 20 years before coming full circle. We'll be right back. All right, welcome back, everybody. Just gonna cover a couple passages from the two that are found within the gospel that relate um, Lucifer's station prior to his banishment from the heavens, and um, when him and one third of the angels of the Most High, those that joined him in rebellion and in the war in heaven, when they were cast out of the upper heavens and banished here to the earth. He said, it says, "How art thou fallen from heaven, O Lucifer, son of the morning? How art thou cut down to the ground, which didst weaken the nations? For thou hast said in thine heart, I will ascend into heaven. I will exalt my throne above the stars of God. I will sit also upon the mount of the congregation. In the sides of the north, I will ascend above the heights of the clouds, and I will be like the Most High." And so this declaration is the whole agenda as far as the New World Order. Because contrary to what we think that the New World Order has only to do with the establishment of world government and global dominance, rule with impunity by the bloodlines that are linked to Satan. And if you don't know that aspect of the story, I covered that in my fourth book, Lucifer, Father of Cain. That the beguilement of Eve, which took place in the garden, her eating fruit from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, that has everything to do with her being seduced by the Nakash, which the Nakash, meaning the Hebrew word, means enchanter, shining one. That he was much like a magician, or because he was a heavenly being, and so to Eve he was supernatural. He seemed to radiate and to have powers and abilities that she did not have at that time. And so, and so when Adam and Eve were cast out of paradise after eating of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, they were transformed into flesh and placed here upon the earth that we now find ourselves living and inhabiting upon. That it was here that she was seduced and impregnated with Cain, and that the children of the devil, the seed of the serpent, they are those that are sitting on the thrones of the world today. And that um, Christ referred to these people as a den of the vipers, the Pharisees, which, um, the Pharisees that came to hold authority over the temple, because they were spared by Joshua in the time when he went in to wipe out every man, woman, and child that was living in the land of Canaan at that time. And as we stated in last week's show, even though a lot of people believe that that sentence was harsh and that they, no, David is the Most High seed, Olive. But anyways, even though most people think that his commandment to wipe out every man, woman, and child was so harsh, and they depict the Most High God, or the God of the Old Testament, Yahweh Elohim, they consider him to be homicidal or genocidal, and that this is, for a lot of people, they have used this um, as reason to hate or to not follow the God of the Old Testament. You, you have to realize that the people that were living in Canaan, that not only had they mixed with the fallen angels, and the watchers, and but they were also involved with the giants, and that the giants were living in that area of Bashan, and there was 60 cities of them. That Og, as a remnant, as the only giant that had survived the flood of Noah's day, and the reason he survived that flood, if you look into it, it mentions this in Genesis chapter 15 of the Targums. It speaks about how he was spared by riding on top of the ark. And I know that sounds crazy, and some people, you know, they believe that this is a, as far as a story, that it's a fairy tale just because it's based on Jewish lore. Some of the lore that goes back 4,000 years. But this is also, as I said, mentioned in the Targum, and this is also mentioned in some of the other books, whether it's the Talmud or the Zohar or whatever. And I'm not saying these are inspired texts, but the fact that uh, Og was spared in this way is historically known through these various texts. And so the people that were living in the land of Canaan at the time that Joshua and Israel went into that land, they were those that worshiped Moloch and that offered their children up in sacrifice. They were also cannibals. They were also involved in the drinking of blood. And these were just some of the abominable um, things they were involved in worshiping their fathers, the rebel angels. And so that's another reason why the Most High God hated um, pagan, pagan religions and idolatry. And this is also why he allowed Israel to be oppressed in Egypt for 400 years. And by bringing them out of Egypt and taking them into Canaan and allowing them to take over that land, he was showing how he was the only true God, and how all of the other pagan gods, how they were nothing more than his angels that were cast out of the heavens uh, long prior. And so this kind of helps people to understand why why Israel was given the commandment to wipe out every man, woman, and child, and also whom they were going up against in the land of Canaan, and how those particular people, as I said, they were um, performing and involved in ritual and religious rituals, which were considered to be an abomination. And you can find all of this information as well, all throughout the Old Testament, as well as the wars of of Israel, the people of Israel, with these particular giant lineages. Because it wasn't just Moses going up against Og and Joshua going up against the sons of Anak, but this continued on, and you find even the story of David and Goliath, and then the children of David fighting against the brothers of Goliath, and how there were four giants um, from that were the children of Og when he married into the children of Cain, who are the original serpent seed. And so, yes, the giants are also the serpent seed, but Cain, the line of Cain, because Cain killed his brother, Cain was the original hybrid son of the devil. And all of those that were born of his lineage and that peopled the world, they were of the devil's children. They were what the Genesis book called the children of the devil, or the seed of the serpent. And all throughout history, through all of the scriptures, you have this war between these two bloodlines, these two lineages playing out. And even with um, Ishmael and Isaac, Jacob and Esau, uh, Christ and the Pharisees, I mean, all of this plays out continuously throughout all of history. You have this war between these two bloodlines, these two lineages. Even with the sons of Jacob and the children of Esau, it's the same kind of war taking place, and it's still ongoing today. I've read that quote from one of the elites, one of those that had been told by his family line that they were, basically the children of the devil. And maybe I'll read that at some point. But um, going back in time, again, the New World Order is connected to Lucifer's attempt, and as well as the rebel angel, they're wanting to be as the Most High, and how at being banished here on this planet before the creation of Adam and before the modern era, the past 6,000 years, as far as modern humanity, they were the ones that had established many of the old, not only the mythology, the Atlantis, the ancient mythology surrounding Atlantis or Lemuria or um, these other ancient cities, even like in India, Dwarpa, and other very ancient cities, and how many of these are now found even at the very bottom of the oceans, meaning that they were built at a time when the ocean levels were much lower, which means that they were built thousands of years in the past. This is all because they were here before we were. And if you look at the Sumerian kings list, you also find that the oldest kings on that list, the very first kings, they had the longest reign, and they were sitting on the thrones of those cultures for a longer period of time than any other kings on the list. And that Berosus, he speaks of the time when the gods, walked upon the earth and how they were here in our ancient past. And so all of this is linked to the rebel angels being cast out on what the book of the secrets of Enoch refers to as the second day. And so it was on the second day that they were cast out of the heavens. And this was, again, as I said, before the incursion of the Watchers, because the Watchers, the 200 angels that left their place of habitation, they left their ordinance is in the heaven, or what Jude refers to. Now, let me pull this up real quick. In the book of Jude, we're given an account of these Watchers having left their place of habitation. That didn't happen until after the creation of Adam and Eve and after they had fallen from paradise. And so the rebel angels, they were cast out of the heavens long, long before the Watcher angels left their ordinances and left their place of habitation. All right, it says this. Hold on. Let me make sure. Okay, yeah, here it is. I will therefore put you in remembrance, though you once knew this, how that the Lord, having saved the people out of the land of Egypt, afterward destroyed them that believed not. And the angels which kept not their first estate, but left their own habitation, he hath reserved in everlasting chains under darkness unto the judgment of the great day. Meaning that, the book of Enoch speaks about a place called Dudael and how the angels were those that had shown and taught humanity um, about the secrets of root cuttings, the mysteries of the heaven, how to create weapons of war, how to refine iron and brass from, different metals as far as the artificers, um, how to perform magic as far as black magic and the ritual, even how to smite the child within the womb. All these things the book of Enoch cites as finding their origin with the Watcher angels, those 200 angels which left their place of habitation and that lusting after the daughters of Cain, they went to whoring after the children of humanity. And so, just continuing with this quote, even as Sodom and Gomorrah and the cities about them in like manner giving themselves over to fornication and going after strange flesh, are set forth for an example, suffering the vengeance of eternal life. I just did a show this past Saturday on the writings of Abraham. And in that particular text, it talks about how the residents of Sodom and Gomorrah, how they would abduct the people that came into their city, they would steal their goods, and then they would basically gang rape them, men and women. And being bisexual in preference, um, and again, many of the giants were living in these particular cities and the areas surrounding Bashan, and they were bisexual in their orientation. And so they would abduct the people that came into their cities and, as I said, basically gang rape them, and steal their goods, and then they would not allow any of the residents, the people there, which, Lot, Abraham's nephew, he was living among the people of Sodom. They were not allowed to feed or to take in to the city any of the strangers that visited their particular cities. And so they were allowed to starve to death. And, again, they would steal their goods and they would uh, rape them, sometimes even to death. Continuing with the quote from Jude. Likewise, also these filthy dreamers defile the flesh, despise dominion, and speak evil of dignities. Yet Michael the archangel, when contending with the devil, he disputed about the body of Moses, durst not bring against him a railing accusation, but said, the Lord rebuke thee. But these speak evil of those things which they know not, but what they know naturally as brute beasts, in those things they corrupt themselves. Meaning that the watcher angels, they had lusted not only after the daughters of Cain, but also had sex with the animals and with the different creatures of the world. And they brought into being these different hybrid creatures, of which um, we find in the mythology of the world creatures like centaurs and gorgons, things of that nature. We'll be right back. Welcome back, everybody, for second hour. I'm your host, Zen Garcia. This is Momentary Zen, and I do want to remind the listening audience that Revolution Radio does need your support, your monetary assistance. If you can afford to share it, and we're not asking you to put yourself out in any way, but for the price of a Happy Meal if you eat at McDonald's, or the price of a meal anywhere else, as far as any particular fast food chain, you can gain access to the archives, which allows you to download in MP3 form all of the shows of all the various hosts on both Studio A and Studio B, going back to the beginning of January, even of last year, I believe. Um, and so that's a lot of shows, a lot of information. And especially for those of you that are pressed as far as your time, and you're only able to get to the network for different time slots, you may not have ever had chance to listen to some of the other hosts, and this would give you the ability to do exactly that. And also in your own time. Instead of listening to the radio and to all the commercialization of mainstream radio networks, burn you a data disk and of a few shows from all the different hosts and see who you groove with and who you particularly like. And then in that way, you can, if you find somebody that you especially like listening to, not only can you then try to catch them live and join in on the discussion as far as the fellowship of the chat room while they are live on either Studio A or Studio B. Um, but you can also gain access to all of the shows, as I said, going back months and months and months, and catch some of the special guests that I know that all of the different hosts have uh, invited and have interviewed on the both the Studio A and Studio B. And also, if you don't want to, sign up for the archives, or that's not your particular thing, you can also support the network in purchasing the bullet drive with the huge amount of emergency information, the three different sizes as far as the non-GMO seed packs, um, for individuals, families, supersize that, it's a worthy investment just to have these heirloom seeds that are not GMO, or and also not tainted in a way that you're not getting the best quality fruits and vegetables. If you are a person that likes to do that kind of thing, likes to garden, which I think growing your own food is a skill um, worthy of investing your time into. And that who knows that at some point something critical could happen, just like with what happened at Hurricane Katrina when New Orleans was drowned, the levees were bombed, and the city was put underwater, and all of the goods, as far as the different grocery stores and convenience stores, gas stations, all the commodities were wiped out in a matter of hours, and nothing was able to truck get trucked in or make it into the city for weeks later. And so, people that didn't have food, didn't have a supply of emergency goods or anything set aside, they suffered greatly, and I'm sure that there were people that even starved to death. So, anyways, those of you that can, please do go to freedomslips.com, click on the donation button. It's very easy to support the network, and that Revolution Radio is the largest listener-supported commercial free and corporate free entity on the planet and on the internet. And that in order for us to continue doing what we do and coming to you in the capacity that we do need your support, and we appreciate all of you, and thank you in advance. Do try to get to the Hawks Fest if you can. I believe last time it was held somewhere in the one of the Midwest states. I'm wanting to say Kentucky, but I can't remember exactly. I did see videos of it. It looked like it was a good time. As far as the family here at Revolution Radio, there are a lot of really good people, very knowledgeable, very wise, very well researched and studied individuals, and um, definitely worthy as far as getting to know if you have that chance, that opportunity. And so, going back to the topic of hand, um, as far as I was talking about the serpent seed, and there was a lot of commentary. Tracy is very well versed on this, and there's others. I know Olive knows about this as well. And this is one of those things that is really a is a is a hidden secret. Like the children of Adam, the sons of Adam, they don't know, or most of the masses, they do not know about the children of Cain, nor that there has been a war ongoing since the time of the garden, and that this is the reason, one of the reasons why they do the things that they do in supporting Lucifer and the other rebel angels and the agenda that has been put forth for them in the, the protocols of the learned elders of Zion, and other um, New World Order texts, quiet weapons for a silent war, things of that nature. There's many, the report from Iron Mountain, um, where they talk about their modus operandi, the how they would assert global dominance, and also like the letter from Albert Pike to Giuseppe Mazzini, the creator of the Italian mafia, and Albert Pike, he was the uh, Grand Master of the Scottish Rite of Freemasonry, and also he was a Civil War general. How they talked about the need to foment three global wars in order to establish um, the precedents for not only the decimation of peoples and the creation of minorities, and the fomenting of controlled opposition, but also as a basis to establish the international organization as far as the United Nations, and giving this organization, um, giving it credentials, and establishing it in a way that it would become respected as um, a organization to deliberate and handle world affairs, and that now most of the nations of the world have come come to be associated with one another and deliberate with one another, share relations with one another through its organizational outreach. And that the whole purpose for the United Nations, um, as established by the ruling elites, the transnational globalists, is to have a front for their global rule, and their, as far as their grandiose power, that the United Nations is more um, about giving them this world recognized authority and this world recognized uh, power, and allowing them to assert this kind of power, um, than it is in handling and stopping wars of conquest, or invasions of other countries, trumping national sovereignty of different peoples or countries of the world, because they have not done that. In fact, the United Nations has been responsible for the creation of more wars, and sanctions, and um, you know, okaying different invasions, and so that's what the world does not recognize, is that the United Nations is not for the perpetuation of peace, but more about the perpetuation of controlled opposition and antagonism. And that historically, if you don't know about government sponsored terror and how the nations of the world or the governments of the world, like especially with the United States and Israel and other Western countries, how we have historically funded the boogeymen. We've funded the terrorists. We've created the extremists, the radical Islamic fundamentalists. Um, and the elites have dictated that they would do this in the protocols that they have put out, and that they are basically laughing at the people of the world, because we don't understand how it is that they are doing this, and that they are utilizing taxpayer um, taxpayer money and funds to support the terrorism, and that they can then uh, pull the boogeyman like a jack in the box anytime they want an incident or a particular occurrence to happen, uh, to foment their agenda, to drive their agenda, to give them a pretext to respond in a certain way, that it has always been laid out in this particular manner. And the people, because they're too ignorant to realize um, that the global elite work in such manner, um, they think that if they support the right or the left, that it will make a difference, when in actuality there's no difference as far as the political parties. Nor and here's the other thing, as far as those countries that end up having within their borders and um, within their countries these homegrown groups, which are nothing but terrorists, like Hamas in Palestine, or Hezbollah in Syria, the Republican Guard there in Iran, which also supports terrorism across the Middle East. Now we have ISIS, um, and these other different terrorist groups, the Muslim Brotherhood. Um, it's taxpayer money that goes to fund and to arm them, and that the dictators that are established, that are basically puppets on a string, when they are taken out, or when they are used in such a way that, like Saddam Hussein when he gassed the Kurds, and because he did that, America used his terrorist activity as a reason to justify the invasion of Iraq, um, which afterwards, there was such a we created more terrorists. We've got a caller, so let me go ahead and take them. Yeah, caller, you had a question or a comment?
Hi, Sam. It's Tracy.
Hey, Tracy, how are you?
Good. How you doing?
I'm doing well, sister. Doing well. Um,
I I was wondering if you're taking callers. I will take this as a yes.
yeah, of course. Always willing to do so. I always forget to really, declare that during the show. I always go off in a tangent. But yes,
No,
callers are always welcome, so the listening audience knows. But please, yeah, the floor is yours.
I want to say I always love your shows. I don't actually, I really do completely agree with your interpretation of the Bible. I just think, you know, it's been proven it was written by a couple of guys 500, maybe 600 years ago, who took all the good stuff out, burned what they could. Otherwise, you know, or there wouldn't be Christian and Muslim signs on the same church all over Europe.
Christian, what
Same
signs? Say that again.
Christian and Muslim, the sign of the crescent moon, and
Oh, right, yeah.
and all the oldest churches, they have both. So it proved there was a time that this was not a thing, that we were just cool with each other. Whatever you want to look to is good. But I just like to add a little bit to your Cain discussion, if that's okay.
Oh, yeah, please do.
Cain is actually, the oldest word we have for that is Cain. Queen, king, all comes from this. Cain was after her mother, his mother, spoke with the serpent. The serpent in the tree. This is Kundalini energy. This is going up the spine.
Mm-hmm.
I know you know this. This is, she called onto herself a boy. This is, and it's been proven, even biologically now, that women can do these things. They can make a child.
Right.
And anything with the C, because you know what I love, well, you probably don't know this, but I love researching letters and numbers and the reasons for them.
Right.
A C is an O that's open. So you have to look at all the names that are involved with C's that we know, that we are told of and told this is important. Even the newest thing, one of the new things, Planet of the Apes has Caesar. What does he do? What is his blasphemy against God? He says no. Even in the Bible story that was washed down, got in, that his brother Abel was ready, willing, and able, and did whatever God wanted. Cain said no. No. God did not kill him for this. Sent him to the land that we know as Nod.
Right.
This being who went out, who we're told is the bad guy, and you have to admit, because I know you read, and I know you're deep on this, the guys we are told to hate the most are the ones who say, no, I'm not doing that. I'm not doing that. Always the ones who say, I'm not doing this thing. Even Samyaza, who later became the scapegoat and all, even Azazel may be linked to him, one of the angels who fell, who came to earth and fell in love with the women, and we know that this planet was mostly female. The oldest thing we have doesn't just reproduce, it self-replicates almost. The oldest thing on the surface of the planet. In the waters, we have the imagination of Mother that has everything. But if we're going to talk about Daddy, who's Daddy, the Jesuit on the crown right now worships the Dark Father. That's Darth Vader, for God's sake. You can't clean that up. You can't make that sound pretty.
Uh-huh.
No matter how, and he doesn't dress as fabulous as the last cross-dressing man on the throne. actually. We used to wear the red slippers and everything. But he did dress snappy, you have to admit.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess my question to you is, if we're going to pick who's the good guy, who's the bad guy, and I really want to know what criteria are we going to use? Are we going to use some God interpretation? Because did you know the oldest name for Mount Kilimanjaro is Enki? So this is one of the oldest gods that everyone knows that Sitchin came out with when he was told to write this thing, which is completely not anything any African wrote or knew about. Enki is a mountain. Mountains are conscious. Mountains are old. They know stuff, I think. They probably feel stuff. So when we have to look at who's the bad guy, who's the good guy, do you not think it's subjective, my love?
Hold on a second, Tracy. We're at break. We'll be right
Okay,
back, and then I'll give you a chance to finish your comment, and then I will give you an answer.
fine.
Hold on,
I would
everyone.
love an answer.
Okay, welcome back, everyone, for final segment. Let me give you just a few minutes here, Tracy, to finish up your comment. But I want to ask you: Do you worship Enki or Enlil or any of the Anunnaki gods?
No, I'm not a big fan of anything that wants to control us. I think this world is perfect and started that way, and so are we. I don't worship something else.
Do you worship a god at all?
No,
No. Okay.
no.
All right. All right. Well, you wanted me to answer the as far as Enki. Did you have anything else you wanted to say?
No, that was pretty much it. I was wondering who you thought the bad guy was and what that feeling or being is. And thank you so much for having me on, Zen. I love your shows.
Well, thank you, Tracy. I appreciate you calling in, and yeah, I'll go ahead and I'll answer that, and then I'm gonna pick up with the teachings. And also, the for the listening audience, you're welcome to call in at any time. I always forget to give out the call-in number and all because I just go off on a tangent. As far as who the bad guys are, if you look into the Sumerian teachings, which I had again, I studied them for many years. I've read all of Zacharias Sitchin's books. I've read all of the Sumerian mythology, the translations of the cuneiform texts, and I can basically tell you that the Anunnaki are the same thing as the rebel angels that were cast out of the heavens a long time ago. Even they, the Sumerians, they show a depiction of some of these beings as being feathered serpents, and that I've in my books I talk about how the worship of the feathered serpent goes back to the same thing as Revelation 12 with the worship of the ancient dragon, or the mythology that is connected to the dragon, or what we see as the reptilian beings, and that they are the bad guys. They are the rebel angels, and then the 200 that join them. Tracy had mentioned about Semyaza and also Azazel. Well, if you look at the Book of Giants that is contained in the Dead Sea Scrolls, that were found in 1947, I believe it was, right before Israel became a nation again after 2,000 years. Um, they Semyaza had gave birth to two giants, Mawe and I forget the other one's name, but the Semyaza, Azazel, they were part of the Watchers. The Book of Enoch names them as being one of the leaders, the chiefs of the different hosts that fell, and coming down to the earth, they made a pact, a mutual pact. It says mutual imprecations to go ahead and commit this grand sin, which the grand sin was to take wives of the daughters of men. If you read chapter 100 of the Kebra Nagas, which is an Ethiopic text called the Glory of Kings, it gives you great detail as to um, who the Watchers were, how they were transformed into flesh um, by Christ, by the Most High, after they left and abandoned their ordinance, as I read from the book of Jude. And so the bad guys are who we call and are referring to as the ancient aliens. Now, the ancient aliens, of course, are given a whole different angle to it. They basically say that the ancient aliens, or the fallen angels, that they were the creators of humanity, and that we were made in their image, and that humanity are actually the children of these extraterrestrial beings. When and I covered this in great detail in my book, because the Sumerian teachings also speak about, as does Genesis, of two different creations for humanity: a pre-Adamic creation, and then the Adam that was given the breath of life, that was created on the sixth day, the modern creation of humanity. The Sumerian teachings refer to these two beings as the primitive worker and the civilized man. Well, if you really look into the ancient mysteries, the ancient history, as I've laid it out in my book, Sons of God, you come to know that the Anunnaki, they tried to create a slave race out of the pre-Adamic human that was found here on the planet when they arrived. And according to their own text, they arrived here 432,000 years ago, or somewhere about then, which is 10 shars, or one shar equals 3,600 years, which, according to the mythology, and you have to really be careful with believing what they say, because again, they are the fallen angels, and just like the things that they teach, those people that channel information, they will teach 95% truth and base it on the story of themselves, but they'll lace it with 5% disinformation, which is basically leaven, and it will confuse people as far as what is truth and what isn't. And so, and so when you look back again at their attempts at creating a slave race out of the pre-Adamic humans that were here, well, they were judged for that. And the Most High, Yahweh Elohim, the God of the Old Testament, he created his own special creature, his own special being in his own image. The Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit, they created the Adam and gave him the breath of life. Basically, put the who we are as angelic beings, our spirits, married our spirits with flesh, and we came to exist as modern humanity. Well, after modern humanity came to be on the scene, Adam and his children, Lucifer seduced Eve, created his own bloodline, his own lineage to work through. And that is the children of Cain, as listed in Genesis chapter 4. And this is the whole reason why Cain and his lineage are listed and cited in Genesis chapter 4. And then you have Adam and his bloodline and lineage cited in Genesis chapter 5, beginning with Seth. The Bible says that Seth was born in Adam's similitude and his likeness. And the reason it says that is because Cain was not of Adam's similitude and likeness. He was more of the nature of his father, which is why he was the first murderer, liar, and deceiver, which Adam was not a murderer, liar, or a deceiver, but Lucifer, Satan, was. And so Cain followed after the nature of his father, and that's why he murdered his half brother Abel. And um, Cain was the stepchild for Adam, and Adam raised him until he did murder Abel. And then he was exiled, banished from the family, and that's when he went into the land of Nod. And according to some stories, he married his own twin sister, who was to be given as bride to Abel. This was one of the reasons why he decided to kill Abel. The other was because he denied that there was a judgment or an afterlife, and they fought over that. You can find that story in the book of Jasher, in the book of Jubilees, if you want to get more detail on that particular aspect of it. But anyways, and so others say that when he went into the land of Nod, he took a wife of the pre-Adamic humans that were already living in that area. So either way, however you uh, perceive wherever he took a wife from, his bloodline and his lineage is what led up to and connects to the children of Cain that were perpetuated by Noah's son Ham. And Ham was born of um, the mother Nama, which was a different wife than the mother that was born. Noah's first wife gave him the children Shem and Japheth, and they are of the seed of promise. They are of the line of Adam. But the Most High told Noah to marry Nama, who was um, of the bloodline of Cain, in order that the seed of Cain would have continuance after the flood. You can find more information about this in the writings of Abraham. Chapter 18 will give you great detail on this. Or you can just read my fourth book, Lucifer, Father of Cain, as I lay out all of this information in that book and give you over 200 sources from a myriad variety of extra biblical, extra canonical texts, which verify this accounting and gives you the source to research it for yourself. But if you are interested in any of my books, you can go to zengarcia.com, click on the contact us, um, and send me an email and let me know which ones you are interested in. My first two books are sold out. My first book, Look Somewhere Different. My second book, When the Evening Dies. Those two are sold out. But I do have my third through my eighth books available. My third book is A Different Way of Being. My fourth book, Lucifer, Father of Cain. My fifth book, Awaken to the New World Order. My sixth book, Sons of God, Who We Are and Why We're Here. My seventh book, Skyfall, The Angels of Destiny. And my eighth book, which is a copy of the Aramaic and Palestinian Targums in English. And if you don't know what the Targums are, The Targums were translations of the original Hebrew Torah in Aramaic. And the Targums that I've released in my 8th book are the English translations of those Aramaic translations of the original Hebrew Torah, which they are fascinating to read. And they give you great insight into a lot of these stories, the biblical stories that people are confused on, like the whole seed of the serpent. The Targums verified this and have this accounting within them. Um, and, I do cite the Targums in my 4th book, Lucifer, Father of Cain, as well. And so if you're interested in any of those books, just contact me, let me know which ones you're interested in, and I'll be glad to give you a bulk discount as well as autograph them for free. Um, but continuing with the story. And so the rebel angels, the ones that were banished from the heavens on the second day, they were here on the planet and in the solar system from the second to the 6th day. And they were the ones, as the Anunnaki or the sons of Anak, they were what, Tracy asked me about the bad guys. They were the ones that were trying to create a slave race from the pre-Adamic humans that were already here. Which, if you're trying to create a slave race, and to enslave the peoples that were here on the planet, I would consider these people bad. And again, as I said, in at the beginning of the show, they are the Nakash of Genesis chapter 3. The Nakash meaning Lucifer, this serpent that tricked Eve into eating from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, that he was the one that actually beguiled her, as it says in 2 Corinthians chapter 11, when Paul speaks about Eve not being a chaste virgin, that she was beguiled by the serpent, and she was impregnated with the child Cain, who was the first hybrid son of the devil. And so, um, this led to, during the time of Yared, which means descent, his name means descent. It was during his life, and he was the father of Enoch. It was during the time of Yared that the Watchers, the 200 angels led by Semyaza and Azazel and many of the other uh, Watcher angels, they left their place of habitation. They came down. They were transformed into male human bodies, and they were able to mate with the daughters of Cain. They were the ones that it says in Genesis chapter 6, the sons of God that mated with the daughters of humanity and created the race of giants known as the men of renown, and that there would be giants on the planet before and after the flood. These were the children that were born of that interdiction, of that. I talked about the two different um, incursions of angels here to this planet. Well, that was the second incursion. And so, it, if you don't know that there were two different incursions, you would not understand how one led to the prehistory, the prior times, and even to the mythology, the stories of Atlantis. These were the rebel angels, the Anunnaki of the Sumerian tradition. They were here on the planet before the modern creation of humanity. And after Adam and Eve were banished from paradise, after she was impregnated with Cain, and the seed of the serpent was born from Cain's lineage, and the seed of the woman from the children born to Adam through Seth. Um, it was the flood of Noah's day was to wipe out this hybrid bloodline, this hybrid seed line. In Second Baruch, the second book of Baruch, it speaks about how 409,000 giants were wiped out. In chapter 12 of the Wisdom of Solomon, it cites how all of the giants were wiped out except Og, and that Noah and his family were the only ones spared, and he was allowed to repopulate the planet because he was pure in his generations, meaning that he was not yet tainted by the fallen angel genetics or the seed of the serpent. But again, as I said, he was told to take a wife of the seed of Cain and Nama, and Ham was born from his marriage to her. And it was through Ham's line that the that Og married into Ham's line, and that Nimrod, who was called a Gibberim, also a giant, he was known to be of giant stature. Um, it was Ham's line that again got involved with not only the fallen angels, but that Og of Bashan, the last remnant giant who was spared from the flood, that he married into Ham's lineage. And like David and Goliath, the giants Goliath and Saph and Ishbenbab, there were four of them. They are the children of Og and Ham's lineage. And so that is what perpetuated the giants after the flood. And the seed of the serpent, they were allowed continuation through the lineage of Ham. And they are the ones that Joshua, when he went into the land of Canaan, he was told to wipe out every man, woman, and child according to the commandment of God. He spared a certain group of people, and they became servants to um, the Levitical priesthood. And when the Sadducees were wiped out, were killed, the Pharisees took over control of the temple, and they are of the line of Cain as well. And that's why Christ, during his time, he said that I know you are Abraham's seed, but you are of your father the devil, and he called them a den of vipers. Um, that's why in the parable of the wheat and the tares, the children of the devil, the tares, are spoken of as being sown by the enemy that snuck into the garden. And that enemy was Lucifer, and he impregnated Cain and sowed the tares. That's why the tares at the end of days are thrown into the fire, and the wheat are gathered for the barn. Same thing with the difference as far as the goat and the sheep, and the wise and the foolish virgins. This whole thing that I explained in this show plays out all through Scripture. And if you